Welcome to this absolute beginner's guide to Rule the Waves 2, Part 5, Fighting Battles. Finally, we've managed to generate a war with Russia, and when we press the turn button, we will be given our first battle. The battle generator is going to give us a brief description of the battle. Yeah, it's not a good idea, by the way, to have your submarines on unrestricted warfare when you've got no submarine. The battle generator is going to give us a quick summary of where the action is going to take place and what kind of action it is. So, a destroyer action. They're exciting, but they can be also some of the most frustrating battles. Reminds you who the enemy is. You can have more than one enemy. Where it's going to be, so Gulf of Riga, its size, our own forces in the area, not that we're going to see many of these, an estimate of enemy forces. This can be inaccurate. For example, it's suggesting that the Russians have an armed merchant cruiser. They shouldn't be able to have one because it takes 4 months to build in wartime, and we're only in the first month of war. If we decline this, it would cost us 119 victory points, which isn't a huge amount, but why throw away victory points when you don't have to at this point? I'm going to accept that. And here we go. So let's rattle through the controls that you have there. There are actually more than is clear from this screen. So let's go down to the bottom left. Course and speed. Normally, you would only use this to change the speed. You'll see that the moment that these are grayed out, that's because you can't change them at the beginning of a battle until you've made contact with the enemy. There are 1 or 2 battles that are exceptions to this, but this is the norm. Across the bottom is some information to locate yourself. So, there's longitude. There is the longitude and latitude. There is the date and the time. This time is given as Greenwich Mean Time, London time. Over here in the right-hand lower corner, you have the weather conditions. So it's overcast and dead calm, so that's not going to really affect things. The range at the moment for daylight is 22,000. That's not as high as it could be, but it's fine for the destroyers whose guns certainly don't go out that far. And the nighttime range will be 4,000 yards. In this corner, aside from the flag to remind you who you are, there is the save game option. This is the only way of exiting this game. If I try and exit by closing the window, it will tell me that to leave, I need to save and exit. This end game button will allow me to force the end of the game, so long as half the battle has been played and a minimum 400 minutes. Basically, if the battle's over, you've successfully run away or disengaged, and you're just waiting for the clock to run out, you can press that button. Preferences bring up an awful lot of messaging preferences that, so long as the messaging isn't bothering you, you don't really have to worry about. The realism setting at the top here does matter. It's currently set to Admiral's mode. That would allow me to only command the lead division and set instructions for the other divisions in the hope that they'll follow me. This is 1903. That hope isn't a strong hope. They will go all over the place. At Rear Admiral's mode, which is the default, I can take over divisions in my force that are within the line of sight of the lead formation, and I can set their course and speed, giving me much greater control over the battle force. And in Captain's mode, I am able to individually get ships to fire their guns and torpedoes at the targets of my choice. There's an extra micromanagement penalty for that, which is that you have to keep on at it. There's no point setting your division to keep on firing at an enemy division which has gone out of range. It will carry on targeting that until it's changed manually. Rear Admiral is usually fine for me, although I do sometimes play at Captain's mode, particularly if I want to control the firing of torpedoes. I'm looking at you, Japan, and those surprise battles where it makes all the difference. Let's click OK. Next to various zoom controls, which I don't normally use. I usually use zoom by doing my wheel on my mouse and zooming in and out. This one, the padlock, is useful if you set that it will fix the screen on your lead ship and the map will move underneath you. This is really helpful when you're in a chasing engagement. So either you are trying to chase down an enemy or you're trying to run away from an enemy. It stops you from having to swipe across and move the map all the time. The circles give you various distancing. The first one gives you the sighting range for the group, how far they can see. The second one gives you the range of your main armament. The third one, which I normally have on, is the range for your torpedoes, mainly because I want to know when I've slipped into torpedo range of my enemy. I don't want to suddenly find myself torpedoed unexpectedly. The green one is for radar when that gets invented. The red one is for aeroplanes, ditto. The red line shows you who you're firing at and gives you different colours if you have a primary and secondary and tertiary armament. I think actually it only shows the primary and secondary. The little ship icon shows you this box here. So currently the yellow shows that we have this ship selected. The box indicates that it's under my human control. The triangle implies that it's under AI control. If I move to a different ship, it will change that ship here. It allows you to see things easily, like whether it's on fire, whether the turrets are pointing at the enemy, or whether you need to just adjust your ship's course to bring your full broadside to bear. The label here shows you what things are marked on the map. Usually you don't mess with these. The objectives is if you've been given an objective to go run down a convoy, you'll get a red dot of where to expect the convoy. Or if you've been asked to bombard a coastal installation, it will give you a red dot of where that is. The base flags are nothing more than these flags here to show you where your bases and your enemy's bases are. Reports give you sighting reports for other forces. So merchant ships, corvettes, submarines, and later on aeroplanes will give you reports, or indeed forces that are out to sea that aren't under your control will give you reports of where they've seen the enemy. And these reports will show on the map. Ship names says what it is, and division names gives you these. I usually turn the division names off because they often get in the way. The ship names has various options, so you can go with none. What type of ship except for destroyers, so that anything without a thing is probably a destroyer. The type, which is what it's set to now, the capital ship's named, but everything else just given the type, or all. And if I do all, you can see the names of these German destroyers. The video control buttons run the game. So the first one gives you a minute, the second one gives you 5 minutes, the third one gives you however many hours you set. By default, that's 3. This one just runs the game continuously, and this final one pauses. I use keyboard shortcuts, so 1 minute, 2 minutes, etc., up to 9 minutes, and 0, which runs the game continuously. You can also press the spacebar, which will run it for a minute. The speed at which the game is run is controlled here, so you can accelerate or decelerate time. So you might want to decelerate time if you're in captain's mode and seeking to line up that perfect torpedo shot that you've always wanted. And if you are wanting to run out the clock and push things on, you might want to be in ultra fast mode whilst you've disengaged. This FA button, fastest available, will do that automatically for you. So here we're not in contact, so we automatically go to ultra fast. And it will go to fast when you are engaged with the enemy. This icon shows you the weather, so it's overcast, not raining, and the sea is calm. The clock tells you how much time you've got until dusk or dawn. So here you can see this ship in this position. It's daylight. Dusk will be at 17 minutes past 6, which is 3 hours and 10 minutes away. You could also get a more visual representation of that by just zooming out and out past the Gulf of Riga, past the Baltic Sea, into this view of the world. And here is the dusk line approaching currently across central Russia. Let's zoom all the way back in again. This will show you a log of everything that's happened in the battle so far. There's an abbreviated version of that over here in this tab, the log tab. This shows you what's happened this turn, and also in grayed out text, what happened the previous turn. This is always a little bit too narrow, so I like to broaden that out in order to be able to see the full messages. This one gives you, it's called All the World's Fighting Ships, which I assume is sort of an earlier name of what is normally called the Almanac. Brings up this screen of national data. If you want to go and have a look at our opponent, Russia, and have a look at its ships, we can see the kinds of different classes of ships that we are up against and what to expect. Some of this information is not correct or is inconsistent. So, for example, here it's telling us that the speed of these Russian 500-ton destroyers is 26 knots. However, if we go here, it tells us it's 28. One might be a design speed and one might be an actual speed, but you're not to know, and you're not to know whether it's just faulty intelligence. Nonetheless, it can be a helpful guide as to what you're up against. These controls are for aircraft and I'm not going to cover, and the question mark gives you a little list of the keyboard shortcuts. Zoom in slightly. If I right click on a division, I get information for that division, the ships, speeds, maximum speeds, damage and flooding, hits. These are the heavy, medium and light gun hits, and then finally the torpedo hits. How many guns do I have and how many of those are in operation? How much ammo is left for the main armament? Who am I targeting? How many torpedo tubes do I have and how many torpedoes are in those tubes? The damage I've received, and fuel and range. Not that those two are particularly useful. I also get a repetition of the course and speed controls that are down on the map. And then I get the instructions for this division. So this is Destroy Division 1. The lead formation is none, which is the game's slightly awkward way of saying this is actually the lead formation. I could make Destroy Division 2 the lead formation if I wished, or any other divisions in this light small battle. There are only two. Let me come out of here and I'm going to right click on this division, Division 2. Here are its destroyers. Its lead formation is Destroy Division 1, so it should follow that division according to its role. There are a number of roles, half a dozen different roles. Only 4 are shown here because scouting is not available to destroyers. They're too small to scout. And screening is not available because it hasn't been researched yet. So here we have an independent role. In independent, the division will do its own thing, roughly corresponding to the course of the fleet flagship, but not closely. Or you could set the division to be core. This would make this division join on to the end of Division 1 and form one long battle line. And for destroyers, that's actually a perfectly legitimate role to assume. Given this is 1903 and your control over the fleet is pretty loose, and you will get a lot of signaling errors, and you will see a lot of behavior under the AI where the division will just go off weirdly and do its own thing. Even putting it to core doesn't necessarily guarantee that it doesn't go off on its own track. Support will place this division on the disengaged side of your lead division as a reserve. I wouldn't normally do that for a destroyer. I would do it certainly if the lead formation was a battleship, and then you had a division of destroyers on the disengaged, perhaps slightly behind side, waiting to tell those destroyers to go and torpedo the battleships you're firing at. It's known as a flotilla attack. I'll show that later. And then patrol. Patrol tells this division to mill around where they are just now. And that can be useful if they've gone off somewhere weird and you just want them to stay put and you're just going to sail the rest of your force towards them and collect them up and then give them a new role. It can also be useful if, to come out here, you wanted, for example, this division to mill around the entrance to the Gulf of Riga here. If I click on Destroy Division 1's controls, you will see that there are a number of controls here. Some are irrelevant, like requesting combat air patrol from land-based air bases. The ability to make smoke can be important, particularly when you want to protect your battleships or want to try and flee and put off the enemy's gunnery. You can hold your torpedo fire. The AI can be a little bit generous with firing torpedoes, and often you'll want to rein it back in and ask it to stop until you really feel like you've got a good target, or when you're in captain's mode, when you actually want to fire them yourself. Likewise, you can hold gunfire or hold gunfire for 10 minutes. These are useful, for example, if you feel that a ship is sinking and you don't want to waste any more ammunition on sending it further into the grave, or if you want to save ammunition and just close in on your enemy. It will put you at more risk from being hit, because even if you're not hitting your enemy, the fact that you're firing at the enemy will cause their fire control to degrade slightly. Lastly, there's this flotilla attack order, which you only get on the lead division of your force, which will tell all of the destroyer divisions that you have that they can torpedo. Now, the AI will torpedo ships if they think they've got a good chance anyhow, but this will order them to go out. In the early game, exactly how well they respect this command is often a bit moot. These are manual firing controls that are only available under captains. Up here, you have the objectives that are being set for the battle. This is often blank, but occasionally it will note that you must, for example, sink 6 enemy ships or go and blow up a land target. The reports are where sightings from other ships, other forces, other spotter planes come in that give you a clue as to where the enemy might be. There will be a fair degree of latitude as to the navigational accuracy of these reports, but it's certainly a great deal better than nothing. The log I've mentioned will tell you what this turn and the previous turn's activities have been, and then finally the order of battle will show you all the forces involved. Clearly there's these two, which is the main German force, these 2 divisions. There are also these coastal batteries, but given we're far into the Gulf of Riga and far away from the German coast, these probably aren't going to come into effect. There could have been other German forces out at sea. There could have been other corvettes patrolling and other merchant ships out there, but none are recorded in this game. The main force also has some controls that people don't notice because they're a bit hidden. Right-clicking brings up the ability to look at the status, and the status will show you the fatigue of the force, how much damage they've collectively suffered and how tired they are. It gives you this option to rally your force. So in a big battle, complicated battle, your divisions may get scattered all over the place, and the ability to draw them back in onto the fleet flagship can be quite helpful. Equally, getting them all to disengage and sending the force back home can be useful. Here's this flotilla attack button again, the same as on the lead flotilla's division's controls. You do have a once in battle option to change your division lead. So if you have a battle squadron of battleships, but it's been slowed down because of battle damage, but not so badly damaged that you want to send it back to base, detaching as it's called, then you might want to transfer your flag. There's also this battle turn away if you want your core battle squadrons to turn away. This is grey because that hasn't been researched yet. If you expand your divisions, you can see all the ships in there. The ships will show an abbreviation of how much damage they've suffered by asterisk. If it's got 1 asterisk, it's slight damage, 2 asterisks, it's medium damage, and 3 asterisks, heavy damage. If it's got 2 or more asterisks, you can right click and you can press detach, and it will detach that ship from your division and send it back to your base. Probably. The AI might decide that the damage control parties have got enough of a grip on the damage to actually send it back into battle. The AI is a bit loose about damaged ships, and will drive them faster and harder than I would normally, which often causes things like bulkheads to rupture, leading to the loss of the ship. So I often try and shepherd my detached ships and send them slowly back to their base. If you try and do it when they haven't enough damage, then it will give you this insufficient damage message and say no. So that's a quick tour of all of the controls.